Hey everyone, welcome in. So today's session is a session where I believe this session is going to pay for itself more than any other direct session that we do because we're not going to talk about the typical product work today. Not going to talk about product sense, metrics, roadmaps, all of that. We're not going to talk about that. But what we're going to talk about today is career negotiations, right? And here is why it's important, right? Let me give you a number to get started. Say two people join the same company, the same role, the same year together, right? If one of them negotiates even a 10% better package and the other doesn't, they accept their first offer, say thank you, and signs. Every single increment after that, every appraisal, every hike, every switch gets calculated on that base, right? Which means that if it's a 10% difference today, it's going to get compounded into lakhs and lakhs over a decade, right? So that is why it's very important for you to understand the overall need and the art of negotiation, right? It is, of course, not very comfortable for everyone, especially I could say it about myself. It was not very comfortable for me to kind of talk or negotiate about this back and forth. You don't know whether it's going to work, you don't know whether the other person actually is going to walk away and whatnot. So it's important for you to understand what this career negotiation is all about. And of course, it's very, very important that this 20 minutes of slight discomfort it does not deter you from actually negotiating well, right? And that's what we've seen in our discussions and all of that in the program as well, which is that little bit of hesitation, that little bit of discomfort, not just maybe in salary negotiation, but in also in your appraisal negotiation, in your discussion as well, right? We prepare for our interviews like our life depends on it, but the moment we crack those interviews, the moment the offer comes, we kind of switch off. We feel grateful, we feel that this is great, and then we don't really feel like negotiating too much, and we feel that, hey, it's almost like they're doing a favor to us by giving us a job, and if we negotiate too much, they might take it back, and so on and so forth, right? But spoiler alert, that it almost never does, right? Companies never take offers back because people are negotiating, given if you do it right? So today I'm going to tell you what that right looks like, right? I'm not going to kind of talk about random jugaad and stuff like that. It's going to be logical. We're going to use some of the top frameworks used by behavioral scientists, etc., to apply them for product managers and go from there. So that's what we're going to do. And to show you what we're going to cover, we're going to cover the following. So as you can see, what is on our agenda here? First, I'm going to give you the toolkit. So I'm going to give you one master equation and 3 conversation tools that apply to every negotiation that you will ever do. So salary, appraisal, even convincing, for example, your engineering lead, around doing something around picking up a feature instead of your tech debt, and so on and so forth. Then we are going to go situation by situation. So we're going to talk about different use cases, because it's not like you just learn the framework and you're going to be able to apply it directly. So there we're going to talk about how you can do it for freshers, how you can do it when you have a higher CTC, and we'll basically take 4 cases. The number one is going to be when you're a fresher with no leverage, or when you're moving into a role without really any leverage. Second is when you've got a low CTC and and recruiters are dragging it down in terms of the offers that they give you. Third is when the current salary is high and the companies are hesitating to give you an offer based on your existing CTC. And then finally, we're going to talk about appraisals, which is how do you negotiate inside your company, which is of course a completely different ball game from there, right? And lastly, we're going to talk about the final piece as PMs, which is negotiating for projects, right? Which I'll, to be honest, argue maybe the highest return negotiation out of all of these, right? Once you get into the role, because your entire promotion usually depends on the kind of projects that you get, right? The quality of projects that you get. So that is why the next piece of this is to understand how you can apply to this. And then of course, the idea would be for you to get a toolkit for you to practice. So that's something that I'm going to share at the end of the video, alongside the YouTube recording as well. So that's something where you can actually practice this out and use it on a day-to-day basis or in a negotiation basis from there. Right. So introductions out of the way, let's get started. Right now, if you remember just one slide from today, right, try and make it this one. right? Every negotiation outcome that we do in our careers comes down to four things, right? And you have to make sure that this equation is true every single time you are negotiating it, right? Like I mentioned, we're going to take it very scientifically. We are not going to look at this from a generic perspective of, you should say this, you should say that. We're going to break this down scientifically, right? Now, this equation is called the getting what you want equation. It's not mine. I mean, of course, I've gotten inspired from existing frameworks from behavioral scientists, but the equation basically is very simple, right? What? Number one, they need to like you, right? Sounds obvious, but a lot of people violate it, right? For example, the moment you turn aggressive, the moment you turn entitled, or the moment you feel transactional, you're taking money off the table, right? So one thing that you need to optimize for whenever you want to get what you want is that the other person should like you, right? This means that you should not come across as aggressive, you should not come across as abrasive, transactional, entitled, none of that, right? People fight internally for candidates they like. I've seen it firsthand. HRs, hiring managers, they fight for people who they feel that, oh, this is a good person to work with, this is a nice person to work with, warm person to work with, right? So number one thing is they need to like you. Plus, they need to believe that you deserve this role, right? So not you believing it, them. They need to believe that you deserve this role, which means that, you never have to make any ask in a negotiation situation without attaching the reason. So when I say that they need to believe that you deserve it, I don't mean that you need to it's an abstract concept where you need to assess that, hey, does this person think I deserve it or not? What I mean is that every time you make an ask in the getting what you want equation, you would make it with always attaching the reason, right? So you would not say, hey, I think I want 25% more, right? That sounds like a demand and that doesn't make the other person believe that you deserve it. But instead you would say, hey, I want 25% more and here is the market data and the scope of this role that justifies it, right? So then you talk about what is the exact market data. You talk about the thoroughness of your research. You talk about the scope of the role. You give them that reason to actually believe that you deserve it, right? Number three in this equation, and this is usually something that a lot of people miss and a lot of people don't optimize for, which is they should be able to justify your negotiation ask internally, right? So whether it's an HR trying to negotiate for salary, whether it is your hiring manager trying to negotiate the projects that you're going to get, whoever it is, they should be able, the person across the table should be able to justify your ask internally, right? So your HR person that's going to be there, they really don't own the budget, right? They have to go to a person, their manager, their senior finance person, whoever, and defend that, okay, why do they think that they need you, or why do they think that they need your number to be justified, right? So that is the third thing in this entire equation, which means that you need to give enough ammunition to whoever is coming through, even if an HR or even if the manager really likes you and loves you, they will not be able to help you unless you give them the reason to actually justify your selection or to actually justify you in front of others internally, right? Very important. And each of these three or each of these four pieces of the equation, you need to make efforts to make sure that you are getting there. So you need to make sure that you do efforts, that you are ensuring that they like you. You need to do things to ensure that they start believing that you deserve it, which means that you need to start giving them examples and scopes and roles, etc. You need to give them enough ammunition in terms of justifying it internally. So logics and reasons, because they won't think of these reasons on their own. A lot of times what we do is in our negotiations, we talk about our demand and we stop there, right? The idea in this equation is for you to be able to give these parameters to the person in front of you, right? The fourth part of this equation, right? They need to believe that they can actually get you, right? It's a little counterintuitive, right? But I'll tell you what. See, if you signal too hard that you've got 5 better offers, what will happen is they might not raise the offer because they'll give up, right? They don't want to spend time on you and raise and give you a better offer and all of that just because you mentioned that, hey, I've got so many offers. So there is a balance that you need to have, which is, it should not be that you should come across as someone who has a lot of offers and that is the only thing that you're using to negotiate, right? What happens is you should come across as someone that they believe is interested in the role. They believe that if they put a little bit more effort than where they are, if they put a little bit more top up on what the number is, they should be able to lock you down. If you go a little further far away from that spectrum and it feels like, okay, we will increase it, but I don't know, right? For example, very simple example, right? If your ask is way beyond your existing number, and also you have, clearly mentioned that you've got a couple of offers or 3 4 offers that you want to use, and you're using those offers to negotiate. But now if those offers are so far away that this person is almost like, yeah, even if we like raise it, even if we give them like 10 12 20% more than where we are right now, uh, they're just going to go away to the other company anyway, so why bother, right? So you have to make sure that you don't fall into that category, or you don't fall into that bracket of, why bother, right? So that is the fourth point, right? And now once these four are combined, right, once these four are together, that is where you get what you want, or you get more than what was offered originally, right? So if you just push on one of them, and that's something that if you mentally, check in and mentally understand that, hey, last time I negotiated with my manager, last time I negotiated with the HR or whoever was there, I just indexed too hard on getting them to believe that I deserved it, right? I probably did not give enough depth, or I probably did not give enough reasons for them to justify it internally, right? Or maybe I did not come across as someone they liked. I probably made them believe that I deserved it. I gave them reasons to justify it, but the way I acted or the way I behaved was not very likable, right? So all of these four have to come together in one place for you to be able to justify and demand more out of your negotiation, out of your career practice, and so on and so forth, right? Now, easy to say this, easy to understand this, it's still theory. How do you actually make it practical? There are three simple tools that we are going to learn today, which will allow you to implement all these four together and allow you to implement the getting what you want equation. What are these three tools, simple to learn, but once you put them into practice, they're actually very, very powerful. Number one tool or number one method is called mirroring, right? Which basically means you repeat the last few words of what the other person says as a question, right? So for example, what happens in this case is, this is, okay, actually before I tell you the tools, I should take a step back and tell you what these tools are going to be, right? So these tools are basically tools to implement smart strategies around quick negotiations or quick discussions, right? These tools are going to ensure that we have enough time, enough depth, and enough discussions to be done where we get the other person, where we get the best out of the other person, even before, the negotiation starts or during the negotiation, right? So let's get back to the first tool. The first tool is called mirroring, which is basically repeating the last few words the other person said as a question. So if an HR says, hey, this is the best we could do at this band, right? You go ahead and say, okay, at this band, question mark. Now you stay quiet. What happens is they elaborate, right? Which means that, okay, well, the band for this level caps at X, but for the senior band, dot, 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 whatever, right? Now what has happened because of mirroring is you've learned one more thing about their compensation structure they were not planning to tell you, right? So I'm not trying to tell you to be rude about it. Don't, be rudely just repeating what the last thing they're saying. Very politely, very kindly. For example, if they say that, for this, the hiring manager that hiring manager has set a particular number, right? Let's say 25 LPA, right? Politely ask them questions that mirror what they said in the last sentence. Talk about 25 LPA. Okay. 25 LPA, and then just take a little bit of a pause, stay quiet. What happens when you consciously add pauses to the conversation is you force the other person to divulge more details. And this is a very strong tactic that we teach in the interviews as well, which is whenever you're doing an interview also, or whenever you're doing any negotiation, always remember that a pause that is 5 seconds for you, but you take that consciously, would always feel 10-15 seconds for the other person, which means that strategically pausing, strategically asking a mirroring question, and then filling the entire discussion with a pause is a great hack to get the other person to say more. Right? If I, for example, am having a conversation with you and you suddenly, after making a small point, go quiet, inherently my mind tells me to contribute and fill that silence with some talk, and that is what is going to help you get more details out of whatever the other person is trying to say. Right? So very simple: mirroring, repeat the last few words. It makes them elaborate more than what they were going to in the first place, and reveal more and more. Why are we doing this? We are doing this because all of this is going to help us fill in things in this equation. Right? It's not like we're going to know automatically how they can justify it. Right? For example, if they're talking about bands, you know that, okay, these are the bands, so you can build an angle of how they can put you together with a senior band in front of their hiring manager or whoever. Right? Second technique is naming, and this is another tool that we are going to use everywhere we are going to practice our negotiation. And that, what is naming? Naming is basically you say out loud what the other person is feeling. Right? So for example, if the person in front of you is probably saying, your manager or whatever, saying that, hey, appraisal budgets are going to be really tough this time. Right? So there, what you go ahead and talk about is, you say a little politely again, but you say, hey, it seems like you're worried I might leave if we are not able to get extra budgets. Or if, for example, in an HR negotiation, someone tells you that, hey, I feel the budget that you're asking for, or the CTC that you're asking for, will be very difficult for us to reach. Right? So again, name out that conversation and try and call out the problem and say that, okay, it seems you're worried that I might not even join if we don't stretch. Right? So when you name the concern before the person in front of you actually voices it, two things happen. One is their guard drops, right? And now you can start addressing the real blockers because you've already called out probably the most uncomfortable piece of the conversation. Because no matter how, if the person in front of you, the HR, has come for a negotiation and is trying to have a discussion, the company wants you. Right? You have to stop thinking about how you're almost grateful for them to give you an offer and so on and so forth. They think you're a good fit. They think at the current band or in and around the current compensation and your skill set is probably best for the role, which is why you've got some leverage to be able to negotiate. A lot of people make this mistake where they almost, bog down when an HR comes to the conversation. So the second thing is naming. Talk about what the other person is feeling. Right? Talk about what you feel in that conversation is probably their biggest worry, and call that out. Right? Very politely, again, very sweetly. Don't make it, a rude mention. Just smile, talk about it, laugh around it, so that you put their guard down. What happens again when you do that? They divulge more details. Right? They, instead of dancing around this big problem of the fact that you might go away or that fact that you might join another company, that completely breaks down because now you've addressed it. Now they know they can be candid about asking you questions on it. Right? The third tool is redirect questions. Right? So open questions starting with how or what, that hand your problem to them. Right? So I'll explain what I mean there. Right? So instead of saying, hey, no, that number is too low, redirect the question and say that, okay, how would we make this work given the market rate for this role is X? Right? So I'll give you another example. Let's assume the HR or whoever has come to negotiate for you has come with a direction of saying that this is the only budget, the only maximum budget that we have is 40 LPA. Right? Now, a lot of times what happens is you, as a person who's trying to negotiate, would go ahead and probably say things like, okay, but my last drawn was 38. It's only a 10% hike on that. Or no, that's not the budget I had in mind. Or no, that's too low. So your first reaction of saying to these things is to understand, is to say things that are a bit big, the biggest problem about that number, right? Or for example, when a manager comes to you with a project that is probably a lot of grunt work, it's not a project that you love or you like, what would happen there is you would go and your first reaction to your manager would probably be, no, this is not a great project, right? This is probably not something I want to do, not interested in this, and so on and so forth. But instead, the way you frame the negotiation or the way you discuss the negotiation with the person is you redirect the question. What is redirecting the question? So instead of saying a no, or instead of coming across as negative to the entire discussion, what you do rather is you give them a situation and you replace your conversation by saying, okay, how do we make this work given ABC? Right? So instead of saying this part of not taking out grunt work of a project, you talk about, okay, but then how do we balance this project out given that I would want something meatier for my next year, or for my career growth? Or instead of saying that, okay, this 40 lpa is too low, say that, okay, then how do we want to make this work given the market rate, or given my last number, or given my last drawn was X, right? So you basically refused without saying no, and now you've made them a problem solver. You've given them a problem statement saying that, okay, I hear you, this project is okay, fine, but then how do you think we'll make this work when I want a career growth which this project may not solve? So what is happening is, once you've put the other person in that situation and asked them to solve problems for you instead of giving them a wall that just says no, they actually genuinely start working hard to solve that problem, right? See, humans in all discussions are problem solvers, right? Whenever you pose a situation in front of the other person, their first instinct or their first job is to look at that situation and say, this is how we can solve it, right? So that is what you have to index upon and go from there, right? So that is how you need to make sure that you are using these techniques: mirroring to get more information, naming to get their guard down, and redirecting to ensure that they are now solving a problem, right? But now, why are we doing all of this? We are doing all of this to basically create a perfectly made situation for us to start our negotiation, right? So even before I go ahead and try to apply this equation, I want to create a very firm base for my conversation. I want to be in a position of strength against whoever is in front of me, or maybe the manager or the HR or the recruiting manager or whoever is there in front of me. I want to put myself into a situation where I am on the front foot. And the best way to do it is use these techniques: mirroring to get them to divulge as much details as possible, naming to call out things that they might be thinking and worried about, and redirecting questions to ensure that you're not saying no to certain things, but you're putting the other person to solve problems, right? But the tools that you see here, they are the base setters. They are base setters for conversation, right? But negotiations are actually one with prep, right? This is basically how you discuss it in discussions. But even before this discussion comes in, the preparation comes in. So let's try and understand how that works, right? It's a 4-step flow. Like I said, we'll keep it very scientific. We'll try and understand how this flow works and go from there. And this is usually to be done 48 hours before the negotiation call, right? Now, what is this? Step 1, list everything that is against you. Right now, this basically feels a bit backwards, but this is a very strong, high value 15 minutes that you would do whenever you're prepping for your negotiation, right? So just to recap, so far what we've done, we've understood what is the equation we are optimizing for. We've understood that in conversations, what are the tools we're going to use to create a firm base for us to execute. Now we're talking about the prep that we will do, which will let us land whatever we want to do. And now we're going to apply this for different use cases, but let's look at the prep. Step 1, list everything that is against you, right? So your low CTC right now, your notice period, the fact that they know that you don't have any other offers, right? Every weakness that you have in that negotiation down, and then write a counter for each. The same works for otherwise as well, right? If you are getting a project, if you're getting an appraisal conversation, note down every single weakness that you have had and write down a credible counter for each, right? Because when in the call they raise it, what will happen is your heart rate will go up, and it's very difficult to improvise at a 120 heart rate, scientifically speaking as well, not just saying it out of the blue. So if you're already prepared with these points, you would come across extremely well prepared. Step two, very important. Research the person, right? Not just the company. So who are you talking to? If you're talking to an HR, the tone, the appreciation that they would have for certain things is very different from the hiring manager. An HR would be a lot more worried about precedent, bands, numbers, etc. Your future boss or the hiring manager would be more worried about getting you inside. They would be more worried about filling the seat with someone good and so on. So who is the person that you're talking about? These are completely different negotiations, right? Negotiations with your hiring manager are anchored more around ensuring that they feel that you are ready for this, they feel that you're going to bring a lot of value, and it's just a matter of few changes here and there, and then you're going to be ready. A negotiation with an HR is more about how technicalities can be worked out to ensure your band doesn't get broken and your structure doesn't get broken of the company and so on and so forth, right? So that's the precedent piece, right? Now, number three is research data, right? Which is, don't go into the conversation without numbers. Try and use Perplexity, try and use GPT, Claude, Google, whatever, to build some numbers before you go. So the worst thing that a hiring manager or an HR would want to hear on a call is, no, I have a friend at company ABC and they earn this much, right? What it does is it kind of kills the conversation completely, because it gives them a very easy way out, which is, okay, yeah, maybe they hire that much, but then that's not what we do here, right? Easy way out there. But if you don't cherry pick and you get some real market data, side data, I was going through the report by Glassdoor yesterday before our call, and I was looking at this role in this city and this number. So go to websites like Ambition Box, go to websites like Glassdoor, go to websites like Indeed and all of that, and find numbers. The best way to do it, the easiest way to do it these days is just log into Perplexity, log into Claude, ask Claude to find numbers. Wherever it's not, try and ask them or prompt them to guesstimate numbers, smartly guesstimate numbers. Have some logic that you're written behind your data. Even for appraisals, even for conversations in the company, have data. Internal data is almost always easier to find. Go and look at the documents and see what projects did your colleague get, what projects did you get, what projects are you being proposed to get, and so on. When you have that data, right, you can actually talk about factually saying that, last year when I was looking at my projects and the projects split across the team, I looked at, I just categorized them into high, medium, low, and ABC got, whatever. And here for me, there was only, two high category projects, and most of my projects were either a low or a medium level, and that really did not give me the opportunity to shine in the last year, and so on and so forth, right? What this does is basically gives the other person the direction of you coming with so much preparation and numbers that if they have to get through that argument, or not argument, sorry, they have to get through that negotiation, they have to come back with factual logic, and that is where usually you would really win that negotiation, right? So have a logic, research the data, and come. Use Perplexity. If it's an internal thing, then just list down, just go ahead and go through the projects that people have done, try and create an Excel out of it. People feel a little hesitant about doing that, but trust me, when you go into these situations with that much effort and that much research, it puts the other person on that pedestal that, okay, I've told you all my problems, now you solve it. Going back to the thing that we learned just a while back, where we said that, hey, you need to ensure that you give them all the ammo, you need to ensure that you give them all the direction so that they can justify it for you, right? So that when they go to someone, that person, they can tell them that, hey, we were actually looking at it and this guy did not get a lot of good projects last time, so I would want him or her on this project. Or this guy is CTC, we did this conversation last time and this is what we said and they've been waiting for long, and so on and so forth. Again, following the equation that we learned, right? Final piece of the prep is design a win-win. So before you go into a call, right, an HR negotiation, a manager negotiation, whatever it is, try and design 2 or 3 win-wins that you're going to end up with. See, no negotiation is going to end at a situation where it's a win-lose. No negotiation, and subconsciously we try to optimize for win-lose. We try to optimize for a situation where we get a great outcome, where we get a great situation, where we get a great number, and the other person just agrees to it. Sadly, that's not something that's going to happen in corporate. You would have to design a win-win on yourself, right? So think on their side. What are they optimizing for? If they're optimizing for budget, try and decide a win-win that keeps your word and also does not let them affect their budget. Maybe a one-time bonus, maybe a bonus in 6 months, maybe a renegotiation of the salary in 3 months, whatever it is, right? If their risk is retention, if their risk is the fact that if you don't get this project, you're going to go away, try and do a win-win. Maybe say that, okay, I'm going to take this project, but I want to be involved in something else so that, it covers up. So designing a win-win is very, very important. There is a Claude skill that I built just for this, that's part of the giveaway with this session. I'm going to put it on the YouTube channel as well, where what we did was we designed a win-win creator, rather, where you put in a situation and the job of that is to give you an outcome of how you can frame it as a win-win for both. So that's one thing that you could use. But even before you go to a GPT or go to a Claude to get it, my suggestion would be, for a few negotiations, try and solve problems for them, for yourself, and put it in a situation where it's win-win for both, right? So that you get closer to your number, they maintain something that they would want to do, and then you're not negotiating anymore, you're just proposing situations, right? So that is something that you need to ensure as a win-win, or that is something that you need to ensure that you build before you even go into the call, right? So what is the 3 things that we've learned so far? This is what we're optimizing for, the getting what you want equation. Then we've understood the tools we're going to use in conversation to keep the other person giving us more and more details so that we can, improve our negotiation or improve our standing in general. And then we ensured that this is the way, or these are the 4 things that we are going to do to prepare. So now with this context, let's start applying, right? With this context, let's start applying. The first use case that we have for the day is fresher offers, right? Now you're a fresher or close to it, right? First real PM offer or first big offer, whatever it is. And the problem in this situation is that you've got no leverage, right? And then the thought process is, hey, who am I to negotiate, right? And all of that. So in the next 3 minutes, I'm just going to kill that. How are we going to do this, right? So we're going to break down this into do's and don'ts, right? So first we're going to talk about what not to do, and then we're going to talk about what to do. So what not to do? First of all, don't anchor on your friends' packages or LinkedIn post or someone's 30 LP or whatever. Placement numbers in these places are usually inflated and are very easily to debunk, right? So that is why you don't want to do that, right? If you walk in quoting these numbers from these random places, what will happen is you will get debunked very quickly, and then your credibility goes away, and then it doesn't make sense. Second, don't negotiate before they've decided they want to, right? Very important for you to understand this particular scene. Whenever you're a fresher and you're starting to give an interview, make sure that you do everything to take it to a place where they have told you that they want you, right? During interviews, your only job is to make them want you. You cannot, even if they, for example, come and talk to you about a number, your simple job is to be flexible about it. Your simple job is to ensure that the conversation moves forward. The moment you come across with a number, come across with a direction where the other person feels during the interview that you might be asking for too much, you might be asking for a number that might be difficult, they'll just drop you and move on. So whenever you are a fresher or whenever you're getting into a role, the first thing that you have to optimize for is they need to want you, right? This is very, very important. Can't emphasize it even more. The only job that you have till the time they agree to give you an offer is this. The negotiation will only start after they've given the offer, right? If you are a fresher or if you're moving into PM and you start talking about money in the rounds, maybe your clarification questions to the HR is around, hey, what's the budget that you have for this role and things like that. It'll kill that conversation very quickly. So you have to make sure that you don't optimize for money till the time you've known that they want you. So now what to do for that, right? How do you implement that getting what you want equation? Very simple. For a fresher, you need to negotiate a bundle, right? So you need to ensure that you negotiate not just the number, you need to negotiate a lot of the other things. See, as a fresher, the company usually has a lot of constraints. They would have a constraint on the base salary, the band, 20 other people will be competing for the same offer and so on, right? And typically in corporate, you cannot fight salary bands, right? If you fight salary bands, it's going to be very difficult for you to get through that negotiation in a winning place. So as a fresher, what you need to do is you need to try and negotiate a bundle, right? What do I mean by a bundle? Three things. One, the role. Second, the team. And the third is the review timing, right? So that is what you have to understand. So team allocation is usually flexible. So the kind of projects you're going to get, try and figure out the best teams, the highest moving teams, the teams that are working on the most important pieces in the product, in their team, and so on and so forth. If that's a no-go, that's already decided, then talk about joining bonuses, talk about one-time bonuses that are used to kind of manage these things, or yearly bonuses that are used. And finally, the review clause, right? Try and get a review clause added in your discussions so that instead of waiting for a year, you get reviewed in 6 months and so on and so forth, right? So that basically brings me to the strongest fresher negotiation move that would apply the framework that we've just learned, which is, hey, what you need to tell to the interviewers, or what we need to tell to the hiring manager, or ask them that, okay, what would I need to demonstrate in 6 months for an early review? That's it, right? Now, what that question does is it shows ambition, it shows commitment, it basically does that they believe they can get you, right? Of course, if you go back to the equation again, liking you, you have to make sure that for the first wait, they need to believe you deserve it. Again, that's why I said you need to get the offer before you even talk about all the money negotiations and everything. Justification internally, and they believe they can get you, is where you are playing as a fresher majorly, right? What you can do to help them justify it is you can start picking bundles instead of a number. So instead of optimizing for base salary, bundle it up with, okay, what are the projects that you can pick on top of it? What are the teams that you can join? Or can you commit? Can you discuss an early review? Can you discuss what are the terms and conditions for getting an early review, and so on and so forth, right? So what basically you want to do is you want to give them ammunition of saying that, okay, we are not doing base salary for this person, but we are putting them into a joining bonus that's a one-time cost for the company, and the fact that they should believe that they can get you, right? So demonstrate commitment, saying that I'm going to stay 6 months, I'm going to do my work, I'm going to work really hard on that, but what can I do for us to evaluate this again in the next 6 months, right? So basically what it does is it tells them that, hey, I'm not even talking about this short term, I'm talking about this long term, where I'm going to come in, I'm going to do my best, and then I'm going to give you a chance to evaluate me in the next 6 months, right? What happens is, what may not be negotiable today because you've not proven yourself, you're still a fresher, can become very, very negotiable in 6 months once they've seen your work and once you've shown value. Most people look at the final version and they feel that, okay, this is what we have, and join. But negotiating the review clause, if nothing ever works, is a very underrated thing in corporate, especially when you're very early in your role, right? So that is what a fresher would do. Now let's move on to the next one, which is the second use case, where your current CTC is low. Right now, this is a use case where your current number is low, and I'm sure a lot of us have been in that situation, and myself have been in that situation where you've been underpaid, right? Your last job, you joined in a bad market. Maybe the company was a startup, they did not have a budget. Maybe you're coming from a services company, and that pays lesser than product companies. That maybe you joined a startup and that didn't work. Whatever. Your recruiter is always going to ask you current CTC. Right? And you know exactly why they're asking, because they will anchor the conversation to the current CTC, and you need to figure out a way by which you can negotiate and escape the anchor. Now, for this, we're going to actually first look at the psychology and then try to build the case, right? Now, the first number in any negotiation becomes the central piece of the negotiation. So everything will get pulled towards that number. So that is why for a recruiter or an HR or whoever is offering you a job, If they know that your first number is lower, they would know that, okay, this gives me a great opportunity to bank around this number. And there, that is where it kind of, shackles that entire conversation in and around that number, which is why they would always ask you to get your current CTC and not tell you your band. Right? Your older number becomes the anchor, and then even a 30% on top of your current becomes a great negotiation tool, right? Instead of 20% below market, 30% above current becomes a big negotiation tool for everyone. So this is what your entire strategy is going to be, and of course, it does. I mean, I'm not saying it will always work, but it does work most of the times. Three moves. Number one move: deflect the question as long as you gracefully can. Right? I repeat what I said. I did not say deflect the question forever. Deflect the question as long as you gracefully can. So when they ask you for your current CTC, try and talk about, hey, let's first align on whether I'm a right fit for this role. I'm happy to discuss and I'm very flexible on compensation once we are there. So it basically tells them that, hey, I'm flexible on compensation. I'm looking at the role, right? Or talk about, could you please share the band for this roles? Sometimes they will insist, I'm not saying that, it's a magical thing where you will just deflect and they'll not, and they'll happily get deflected. Sometimes people who are talking about it, they will not hear it and they will say that I need a number before we proceed. And that is where, if that is the case, you move to move two, right? Move one is try and deflect it as long as you gracefully can. Let's say 30-35% of the conversations you will be able to deflect it. 70% of the conversations will not get deflected. The person in front of you will ensure that they are asking that question again and again, and not really is going to work out, right? So what is move two? Move two is that if you must share the number, share with a frame around it. Don't share the number alone. So my last, okay, TK, you mentioned the number. My last was 25 LPA. If you stop there, then it just becomes a number that everyone gets anchored around. So never let the number get shared alone. Always share it with a frame. I'll give you an example. My current is X, but I would want to be upfront that it reflects a role that I took 2 years ago in a different market with a much narrower scope. And that is exactly why I'm making this move, right? For this role, I am benchmarking it against the market, which is in Y range, right? So what you've done is you've honestly disclosed your CTC. You, of course, never lie about your CTC. You don't want to, get into that loop. You have to mention it, and they would check their bank statements, etc., and all of that. But the second thing, when you cannot really deflect the question, is you frame it. Now, again, a lot of people, when I say this, they would say that, okay, but HRs will not hear it and they will just reject it and so on and so forth. Yes, they will. I'm not saying that every single person you're going to win every single negotiation, but it's about percentages. So if 30% of your conversations you were able to get out with move one, which is deflecting, the remaining another 25-30% of your conversations you will be able to get away with move two, which is to frame around your CTC. So don't tell your CTC directly. Always tell it with a frame around it, and that frame usually would be the market rate. That frame would be the number that you were doing last time. That frame and why you were doing it. Sorry, that frame would be the fact that you were at a startup and you had ESOPs and whatnot. Right? If both of them don't work, again, to improve the probability, we move to move three. What is move three? Move three is to build a counter anchor. Now, what is a counter anchor? Counter anchor is basically your target number, but backed by three pillars. What are those three pillars? Market data for the role, the scope that they are hiring for, and any premium skills that you carry, right? AI, for example, is the obvious one right now. So once what happens is move one and move two are done and maybe they don't work, what you do is you pull out move three, which is you build a counter anchor. The counter anchor is basically the target number that you have in mind, but you talk about that number using three particular pillars. What are those pillars? What is the market data for that role right now? What is the scope that they are hiring for? And any other premium skills that you can carry. Easy to thing to do right now is LLMs, right? What are the LLM skills? What are the agentic skills? What are the RAG skills? What are those skills that you've done in the past that usually aren't as obvious in candidates, right? So what happens is when the justification is about the role's value, 60, 70, 100% jump, start sounding greedy, and so on and so forth. So basically, when you try to build a set of counter anchors where the justification is about the role's value, the justification is about the role's scope, you stop sounding as someone who is greedy and just looks, and the conversation moves around what this role is and how we are going to go about it. Right now, of course, like I mentioned earlier as well, you need to expect pushback, right? This is a huge jump from your current, we have this much band, we cannot do this, and so on and so forth. So the preparation of that is important, right? Prepare the response saying that yes, I agree, and the gap is precisely the reason I'm actually in the market. I'm not asking you to pay me relative to the past, I'm just asking you to pay the role from what it is worth, right? Of course, what you need to do is you need to make sure that you use these moves sequentially. You try move one, that will eliminate some of the negotiators and not let you anchor a low CTC. Move two is that will be talking about a frame around your existing number and giving them a reason why the existing number doesn't make sense. And then move three, which is a counter anchor, where you talk about your target number, but you talk about three pillars around that target number, the market data for the role, the scope that you're going to do, and any other premium skills that you're going to carry. Now, even with all of these three, you're going to get pushback. But what happens is, because you're trying to use this counter anchor, or because you're trying to use this tactic, it can nudge the negotiation a lot more towards you instead of sticking in and around the current number, right? So always remember, the counter anchor, or the number where you have to go, and the number that is your current CTC when your current CTC is low, needs to be anchored around these three things, right? The premium skills that you build, so talk about that. The scope of the new role and why it's much larger than what you've been doing in the past, and then the market data. That is what you can use to make sure the conversation moves up after using move 1 and 2, which is trying to deflect the CTC, and if it doesn't, then trying to share it with a frame. Move 3 is something that builds your narrative to get there, right? Now, moving to the third use case and the second last use case for today, which is the high CTC bracket. Now, of course, this sounds like a luxury problem, right? But it's not. High CTC candidates actually get rejected even before the negotiation starts, because the companies start feeling that, okay, we can't really afford this person, and even if we spend time in an interview, it would be a waste because we can't really do anything with this person, right? If you remember the term 4 from our equation that we had, which is the high CTC person, it's very difficult to get the people to believe that they can get you. So that's the thing that you are going to try and improve here, right? If you just notice smartly, what we were doing in the low CTC one was we were talking about more around they believe you deserve it, right? This was the pillar we were trying to optimize for. Likability, justification internally, and believe they can get you. They can usually believe they can get you at a low CTC, but them believing that you deserve it, and then them having ammunition to justify it internally is what you are working on. For a high CTC piece, you are working on they believe they can get you, because that's what they don't believe because of your high CTC. So in this case, what happens is we're going to use like a simple hub and spoke to understand. Now, the high CTC playbook has got two halves, right? Left and right. Half one is killing the fear early, right? If you sense hesitation, if you talk about problems, if you sense that they are a little unsure about you joining and so on and so forth, take it on directly. Talk about, yeah, I know my current number looks really high for the band, but I want to be clear, I'm generally interested in this move, and the structure of the compensation is something that I'm flexible on. The value matters a lot more to me than just one singular number, right? So the first thing that you do in the high CTC playbook is you cut down the fear early, right? Remember the thought process that we discussed, which is the tactic that we discussed here when we're talking about it, naming, right? Call out the problems that were there. Call out the problems saying that I already know the fact that you're worried about my current CTC, but I am flexible on the structure of the compensation. The second one is the major skill. Look at your discussion as almost a sales cycle or almost as a sales negotiation, right? Look at it from a total deal value perspective. right? So once again, very important. So what you do is you've got multiple directions for someone with a high CTC, right? Fixed salary is only one piece of the six things that you have as someone with a high CTC. What are those six things? One, variable, ESOPs, review timing, scope and title, location and remote flexibility, joining bonus, right? So your positioning or your discussion when you're negotiating with a higher CTC should be in and around this entire deal value set, right? You should be maybe, you may be firm on the total value, but not really firm on the fixed number, right? Using this entire spectrum to improve your offer and negotiate, right? Now, why does this work? Because different companies have different constraints, right? Maybe a startup cannot match your fixed, but can give you a lot more ESOPs and give you a VP title that's going to help you next time, right? A big company will not be able to break their band, but will almost always be able to give you a joining bonus and one-time money that doesn't set the precedent every time. So that's the easiest to get a yes in their system, right? When you open six almost currencies in this deal value instead of just one, what you have is you've got the other company getting multiple ways in which they can pay you, and more ways in which they can pay you means that more chances of them actually finding a way to pay you, right? So that is what you need to understand and think about, especially when you're negotiating with a higher CTC. And most people really don't think about it, right? They think about just that one number and look at only that, and that's very important for you to understand. Negotiate things that give you in the future. I understand that bands are here, but can we agree for an early review in 6 months, which are tied to these outcomes? Future commitments, especially when you're coming in a high CTC situation, are very cheap for people to give today. And if you get them in writing and follow up in the next half or the next 6 months, you can actually improve your situation a lot, right? So that is the next way in which you do this. Now, one warning here: don't go for verbal promises, especially when you're at a higher CTC, because people might move, managers will change, people change teams and all of that. So get it written in an email, whichever piece of the entire deal value you're using. If you're using an ESOP, that's going to get added. If you're using a variable, if you're getting a joining bonus, if you're getting a remote work agreed maybe 2 times a day, two times a week, sorry, or something like that, try and get that in written, try and get that on your offer, so that whenever things change, whenever terms change, you still have something to go back to, right? So don't, of course, be rude about it, but just be about matter of fact about it, which is that this was agreed and you would like that on paper, right? That is what it's going to go from there, right? Now the last piece, or the last couple of pieces, we'll switch games. So everything so far was negotiation with outside people, right? Now let's look at the appraisal negotiation work piece as well, right? Now, the uncomfortable truth about appraisals is that by the time you've actually come in the review meeting and thinking about asking for a better rating or a better hike, it's already over, right? Because what happens in appraisal meetings, I'm sure all of us know, budgets were allocated long time back, the calibration has already happened, your manager may or may not have fought for you, and that's it, right? But the raise that you're talking about was actually won or lost in the 6 months leading to the review and not in the review itself, right? So for that, I have a very simple system that I'm going to tell you, which is the 6-month raise system. Now, the 6-month raise system is got 4 steps, right? 4 milestones almost. And whenever you have an appraisal coming, right? Of course, I think appraisal season is right now going on. So this is something that you can apply for your next cycle, which is probably in December or whenever. But you need to employ this 6 months raise system. What is this 6 months? Milestone 1, 6 months before the appraisal review, set goals with your manager explicitly, right? Ask for 15 minutes and, say some version of, hey, I want to be the top performer this year. I want to bring in the most value in the company this time. I want to, give my best version to this year, and whatever it is. Can you tell me what exceptional would look like in my role, right? Write down whatever they say, record whatever they say, send them a recap email, and action out whatever they expect in the next 6 months. Why? Because 2 things. One is you have a documented definition of what an exceeds expectation is going to look like, and your manager actually is going to use that. And the second is that your boss now knows that, okay, this person is going to work hard this time. They're going to be conscious about it. They want to know, they've given you the numbers, and they want to know that, okay, this conversation will happen in the future as well. This person is looking to work hard this time, right? So ensure that your boss is never ever surprised by the ask. So if you go in the discussion during the compensation review and sit at that time and just mention your number at that time, and that number is away from what the boss was or manager was already thinking, battle lost, right? So you have to ensure that 6 months before, set the goals, set the timelines, and then set everything in place, so that two things: one, you've got a documented set of objectives to chase, and two, your manager knows that you're chasing a good number or chasing a big number this time. Second, milestone 2, close the loop every 2 weeks, right? Give short updates. The best way to do it is create a PPT template for yourself, create a deck or a Claude chat, whatever it is, for yourself, where every 2 weeks, give the manager a short update. Here is what was expected. Here is how I stand. Build a routine where the manager begins to expect that Monday morning, Ravi is going to send me this on Slack, 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m., whatever, right? Don't be pushy about it. Async, small email dropped, small Slack message dropped. That's it, right? Don't talk about it too much. Don't bring it up in every one-on-one and every discussion. Don't be pushy about it, but just ensure that whatever the discussion that happened earlier on, whatever you aligned 6 months back, till the time you're 1 month before the appraisal meeting or appraisal time, you are following up every 2 weeks, right? So this gives us around 5 months. 5 months, every 2 weeks, you're going to have like around 20, or maybe, I don't know, 40 weeks, or sorry, 20 weeks. So every 2 weeks, around 10 updates. So 10 updates around. Don't be annoying about it. Like I said, small async updates. Don't bring it up on lunches. Don't bring it up in one-on-ones. Don't bring it up in front of your colleagues. Don't be annoying about it. Remember, they need to like you, right? That equation that we discussed, your manager needs to like you fundamentally for you to win the negotiation. So don't be pushy and annoying about it, but just very matter of factly talk about it, right? Now, what is milestone 3? This is 1 month out. Now compile the evidence into one page, right? So talk about whatever you committed, whatever was delivered, the metrics, the extras, whatever you basically have been doing in the last 4 months or 5 months. Just compile all of them in one place, and also look at the market data for your role. Finally, milestone 4 is the review day, right? Which is where you walk in with a written proposal. You already know the numbers. You already have the document or the slides that I talked about that you build, and all of that is already ready. That is probably the best way to get a very good appraisal, right? And I mean, at the fundamental of it, if you look at it, it's just do your work really well. But a lot of people do their work really well, but still do not get the best appraisal that was possible. That is because they don't follow this timeline. They don't follow this raise system, which is 6 months before, align, then bi-weekly loop closure of short, quick async updates, build an evidence doc 1 month before, get more and more on deeper into that evidence doc, and then use that evidence doc in your appraisal conversation, so that even if it doesn't work, you at least know that there is, I mean, the work was never the problem, right? You know that the company's budget may have been a problem, or just time for you to move out, if even after you've done all of this and it hasn't worked out. But ensuring that you follow this system really helps you, and would really want you to apply this in your next appraisal cycle. It's helped me in the past. I'm sure it's going to help you in the past as well from there. Right. Now, basically what you want to talk about in this situation, or in this 6-month raise system, is reframe it, right? Basically, instead of talking about, hey, can I get a raise? In the appraisal meeting that we see, the review day meeting that you see, the conversation is just simply around how valuable you are and how you can be more valuable to your team, right? So think about, right? Your manager, whenever you're talking about the compensation, whenever you talk about the appraisal and so on and so forth, it's a difficult conversation for them as well, right? But if you flip the conversation and make this entire 6-month race system about how you can be more valuable to your manager, you have an extremely high chance of winning the appraisal negotiation from there, right? Now, very I'm saying that with a lot of experience, that if you apply this, possibly you may be the only person in your manager's org actually doing this, because most people just skip it. Most people think that, okay, the work we do, we're going to do our best, we're going to put our head down, continuously do it for the entire year or for 6 months, and then the appraisal is going to take care of it. A lot of times that's not how it ends up. A lot of times how it ends up is a surprise where you feel that you're doing a lot of hard work, but it's that hard work is not as valuable to your manager, right? So that is what you have to understand, or that is what you have to ensure, right? So that is where we're going to talk about the fact that you have to move the conversation from can I get a raise or can I get more money to how can I be more valuable for you, right? Final piece of what we will discuss today, which is can you negotiate for better projects, right? Now, nobody teaches this, right? But this is actually the highest ROI negotiation for your career. For PMs, it's even more important, but otherwise also it's actually very, very important, because the projects that you are on determine the appraisal you're going to get, right? Your promotion case, whatever you're working, the projects you are on really determines that, right? So 4 quadrants or 4 pieces that you need to understand, and you need to figure out which one you are following into it. This is a 2x2 matrix that I have, and this is what you need to optimize for, right? What is the first? Top right, that's the best way to be there. High visibility, strong fit. Claim a direct case to your manager, right? This project needs X and Y. I have done exactly that. Here is my plan for the first 30 days. Be direct, be prepared, be specific, and you will win these projects the more often than not. Top left is pitch it. Create the visibility so you'd be great at it, because nobody important is watching. So pitch the project that you're picking. Your job is basically to create the visibility for that, connect it to a metric that your manager or your leadership care about. Bottom right is a big visible project, right? But honestly may not be your strength. So you can trade for it, right? Talk about, hey, I can leave this project and move to another one, offer a swap and take something maybe in the northern half of the spectrum that I have just shown. Or bottom left is basically the one that you have to skip, right? Low visibility, weak fit, skip, try and protect your bandwidth, try and keep pushing back, try and saying no to this, because getting a no and agreeing to that is a negotiation too, right? Every low leverage project that you're going to do is stolen bandwidth that you get from your time that you could have done to work on something that is high visibility and so on and so forth, right? So you're going to get 4 different kinds of projects every time. You're going to get high visibility, strong fit projects, which are you are good at it and high visibility. Take them, claim it immediately. Do everything you can to justify to your manager why you're the best person to take that. You use the same tactics that we discussed in this entire session today to do it. Second, if it's a if it's a low visibility project, but good with fitment with your skill set, then go ahead and do it. Try and create visibility for this project. Try and create an anchorage of people talking about this project because you are good at it, even though it was low visibility earlier. Then if it's a big visible project but not really fit with your work, but not your strength, trade it to get your manager to get something maybe that's lower visibility but higher fit, but trade this kind of project. And then if it's a low visibility and a low fit for you, skip it. Do whatever you can to push back, right? Now, finally, before we close for the day and end this session, I know we are a little over time from the promised 1 hour, but I just want to summarize with the rules that apply everywhere, right? Number 1, bundle your asks at once. So never negotiate serially. Never say salary today, title tomorrow, joining date after that. Negotiate a bundle. Whenever you are not able to get a salary, negotiate something else. Whenever you are not able to get a joining bonus, negotiate the deal value, right? Never negotiate it one by one, because every time you go back, and ask for something new, you burn bridges, right? So never negotiate sequentially, always negotiate as a bundle, present everything together, and that signals, what you want and what really matters. Second, ignore ultimatums, theirs and yours. So when they say, hey, this is final, this is what it is, don't make them repeat it, don't challenge it, just move the conversation elsewhere, right? If the ultimatum was really a problem, then you will come back to it or they will come back to it. But if it wasn't, they'll just forget it and you have room. So basically deflect the conversation away from ultimatums. For example, if the ultimatum is, I have to close this today and this is the band and that's it, try and move the conversation to other directions so that you get a chance to ignore that and talk about something else. If it was a real ultimatum, they will actually come back to it and then of course heed it. But first time, whenever ultimatums are brought up, try and push them away or try and ignore them for a bit and talk about other things to negotiate, right? No means no only for today. So important rule to understand in negotiation: bands change, projects change, managers change, quarters change, goal changes, whatever, right? So a person who would say no to you may say yes in the future. So always, a cheap way of getting a great deal out of it is just being patient. So getting something in written that gives you great 6 months later is always better than arguing and fighting right now and letting an opportunity go. So always ensure that you remember that no is always no for today. Getting a cheap agreement in written for a future date, 6 months down the line, a review cycle, 6 months down the line, cycle on appraisals, is always a better way to do this if you're hitting a roadblock, right? And finally, never end on a no. So end on a yes or an explanation. So keep asking, why they can't do something. Keep asking it till the time it becomes very logical to take that answer, or you basically get an yes. So always talk about, help me understand what makes the band difficult. Help me understand why, we cannot stretch on the joining bonus. Try and get explanations for everything, right? Because when you get your explanation, you can apply the rules that we have learned to actually make them either like you more. If the explanation is around, structurally something, you can give them offer or ammunition to change it, and so on and so forth, right? 5, never lie ever. Not about your CTC. Don't fake competing offers. Usually the industry is smaller, so don't lie about these things. Try and ensure that you are factual. Use the frameworks that we've learned, and they're going to be enough to give you good outcomes for your negotiation. And 6, always end the conversation with them liking you more than they were liking you earlier, right? So always be in a conversation where the HR is not tolerating you. The HR or the hiring manager is not just waiting to get the conversation over with you because you are so pushy from there. So negotiate hard, but don't leave them in a situation of tiredness from the conversation they've had. Always ensure that the first piece that we did, right, the first thing that we learned in this equation, every single piece of this has to be true, and the most important piece is the leftmost, which is the manager, the HR, the hiring man, whoever is doing that conversation with you should like you, right? Now of course, frameworks don't really are not going to negotiate for you, which is why there is an application template. I'm going to drop that application template with the recording on the YouTube channel as well. So that's where you have to actually apply this. You have to ensure that you start applying whatever we've been learning today in your negotiations, and that is really going to help you hopefully get a better salary, get a better project, a better appraisal, and yeah, if all of any of that happens, this 1 hour probably would have been the most high leverage 1 hour that you would have spent. Perfect. All right. So thank you so much for joining. I know it's a Friday evening, and I'm sure you're going to have a good time after this. So please do enjoy your Friday evening. Thank you so much for joining and coming. I hope this was helpful, and hope to see you next week or the week after that again, whenever we do our next free webinar. Thank you so much.